When I arrived at the Hotel Miramar for our annual family reunion, I already felt the knot in my stomach. These gatherings had always been the same. Endless comparisons, backhanded compliments, and my mother's sharp looks whenever I didn't fit into the image of perfection she adored in my sister Lucia. But this year was different. This wasn't just any luxury hotel, it was mine. 6 months earlier, my grandfather, the only person who ever truly believed in me, had quietly left the hotel to me in his will. None of them knew. Not my parents, not Lucia, not her smug husband Roberto. They still thought I was the struggling daughter with a hobby business in design. They still thought I should feel lucky just to be invited. The lobby glittered with marble floors and chandeliers, sunlight spilling in through glass walls that framed the ocean outside. I stood quietly near a column, watching my family arrive one by one. Hugs, kisses, laughter, especially for Lucia, as if the whole event revolved around her. When my mother finally spotted me, she frowned. "Carmen, I thought you wouldn't come." Her voice was clipped, the disappointment almost theatrical. I forced a smile. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Roberto gave me his usual up-and-down look, then smirked. "Still trying to make it in your little design business? Doesn't look very profitable." I bit the inside of my cheek. If only they knew that my little agency now had international clients. If only they knew that the 5-star hotel they were standing in, every chandelier, every suite, every polished detail belonged to me. The room assignments were handed out by Miguel, the hotel manager. My sister and her husband were given the presidential suite with an ocean view. My parents got an executive suite, my cousins spacious deluxe rooms. And me? "Carmen, you'll stay in room 108, next to the laundry, smallest room we have," my mother announced with a shrug. She didn't even look at me when she said it. Some cousins shifted uncomfortably. Others smirked. Miguel hesitated, his eyes flickering to mine, but I gave him the smallest nod. He knew the truth. We had agreed not to reveal my ownership during this reunion. "It's fine, Miguel. Room 108 will be perfect," I said calmly. But as I walked away with the key, I could hear Daniela whisper to another cousin, "As always, Carmen gets the leftovers." The room was as bad as I remembered from my student years, barely enough space for a single bed, with the constant hum of laundry machines vibrating through the wall. I sat down and closed my eyes, steadying my breath. I could have walked out and demanded the presidential suite on the spot. I could have exposed them all. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to finally understand why my family had spent 30 years treating me as if I was the least valuable among them. And deep down, I suspected this weekend would finally give me the answer. The first evening set the tone right away. The welcome dinner was held in the main restaurant of the hotel, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows opening to the ocean. Guests usually competed for tables here, but of course, my family was immediately seated at the very center, the largest round table reserved just for them. Everyone sat in their usual hierarchy. My parents at the head, Lucia and Roberto to their right, glowing like a royal couple, my cousins surrounding them. My chair, naturally, was squeezed behind a thick column, half hidden from view, as if I didn't belong in the picture. The waiter handed out menus, and my relatives ordered the most expensive dishes without hesitation. Lobster thermidor, wagyu steak, bottles of vintage wine. When it was my turn, I asked simply for a salad. My father smirked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Carmen, can't you afford something better? We can cover you if you're short on money." A chuckle rippled around the table. I looked at him steadily. "The salad is fine. Thank you." Lucia leaned in with that proud sparkle in her eyes. "You know, I just got promoted again at the bank. Regional director now. They say I might be up for the national board in 2 years." My mother clasped her hands together. Our Lucia always knew what she wanted. Not like Carmen, wasting her life with this drawing business. The word drawing dripped with contempt. Roberto laughed softly and raised his glass in mock toast. To successful careers. I felt the heat rising in my face, but before I could respond, the head chef himself appeared at the table. Antonio, a man I had personally hired months ago, greeted each guest politely, then turned to me with a small respectful bow. "Was the salad to your liking, Miss Carmen?" The table went quiet. Everyone looked at me. My sister squinted. "You know the chef?" "I've crossed paths with him before," I replied vaguely, hiding a smile. The truth was I had interviewed Antonio myself reviewed his resume, and offered him the position. Suspicion flickered in my family's eyes, but they quickly turned the conversation back to themselves. Glasses clinked, stories flowed, mostly about cars, houses, promotions, things meant to remind me of my supposed inferiority. But I wasn't listening. I was watching, observing how my mother looked at Lucia with pride, and at me with thinly veiled disdain. Observing how my cousins avoided defending me, preferring to laugh along with the jokes. Observing how every word I said was dismissed or ignored. Later that night, when everyone retired to their luxurious rooms, I lingered in the deserted lobby. Miguel approached quietly, holding a cup of chamomile tea. "Your grandfather would be proud of you," he said softly. "He always believed you were the one who could take care of his legacy." His words tightened my throat. My grandfather had been the only person in the family who truly saw me. When the others mocked me for being too quiet, he had said I was thoughtful. When they ridiculed my business, he had asked about my clients with genuine interest. Sometimes I wondered if he hadn't made a mistake, choosing me as his heir. But Miguel shook his head firmly. "In just 6 months, you've implemented more improvements than any owner before. The staff respects you. You've given this hotel a new life." Don Ernesto was never mistaken. I sipped the tea slowly, letting the warmth calm me. But even as I sat there, part of me wondered how long I could keep the secret. Because every humiliation, every insult they threw at me tonight, it all happened under my own roof. And sooner or later, they would realize it. The next morning began with breakfast in the grand buffet hall. Sunlight streamed in, glimmering off the glass counters filled with every delicacy imaginable: fresh croissants, smoked salmon, tropical fruits, cheeses from Europe. Guests moved gracefully between stations, but my family treated it like their private kingdom. Lucia piled her plate high with pastries and bacon. Roberto filled his with an assortment of exotic dishes. My parents sampled imported cheeses. When I sat down with a simple bowl of yogurt and fruit, my mother frowned. "Is that all you're eating? No wonder you look so thin. You look sick." "I'm perfectly healthy, Mom. I just prefer something light in the morning." Roberto laughed loudly. "Light or economical?" "Probably both. Carmen counts every penny she spends." The table erupted in laughter. My cousins smirked, some of them clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to defend me. I breathed deeply and focused on my plate. It wasn't the moment to reveal anything. Later, the day unfolded with a schedule my parents had carefully arranged. A tour of the hotel gardens, time at the infinity pool, massages at the spa. Of course, every arrangement was tilted toward Lucia and her husband. They were given the premium treatments, the best time slots, the first choice in everything. When my turn came at the spa, the receptionist apologized. "I'm sorry, but your premium massage reservation was canceled. Only a basic treatment is available." I didn't need to ask who had canceled it. My mother looked at me with fake regret. "You don't mind, do you, Carmen? It would have been wasted on you anyway." I smiled faintly, as if it didn't matter, though my chest burned. The basic massage was fine, but as I lay there, I wondered why my family seemed determined to push me into the shadows at every turn. By lunchtime, the topic turned to inheritance, always a dangerous subject. My mother's voice softened with false nostalgia. "It's a shame your grandfather sold the hotel before he died. It was his greatest pride." "Well, he must have received an irresistible offer," my father added. Lucia sighed dramatically. "If the hotel were still ours, imagine how perfect these reunions would be." I nearly choked on my water. My family, sitting in my hotel, talking as if it had slipped from their grasp by chance. If only they knew. As the meal dragged on, my Aunt Elena, always observant, leaned toward me. "Carmen, what was that employee discussing with you last night?" Looked very serious. All eyes shifted to me again. I smiled casually. "Just a small mix-up with my reservation. Nothing important." Lucia rolled her eyes and whispered loudly to Roberto. Typical Carmen. Always causing problems. That evening, while the others dressed up for cocktails on the terrace, I wandered the quieter hallways of the hotel. I paused by the portrait of my grandfather Ernesto, hanging in the main corridor. His kind eyes looked down on me, as if reminding me why I had chosen silence so far. This wasn't about punishing them. Not yet. It was about understanding. About finally seeing clearly what 30 years of humiliation had been covering up. But as I stood there, I realized something else. The staff knew the truth. The chef, the receptionist, Miguel. Even the housekeeping ladies greeted me with discreet respect. It was only my family who remained blind. And maybe that blindness was exactly what I needed. That night the cocktail hour was held on the rooftop terrace, the crown jewel of the hotel. From up there, the city lights sparkled on one side, while the ocean stretched endlessly on the other. A live band played soft jazz, and waiters moved elegantly with trays of champagne flutes. Lucia, of course, made her entrance in a flowing emerald green dress that turned heads. Roberto clung to her side, playing the role of devoted husband while scanning the crowd for admirers. My parents glowed with pride, presenting them to distant relatives and business contacts as though they were royalty. I stood near the edge, sipping sparkling water, half hidden behind a tall potted palm. That's where I felt most comfortable, observing, not participating. Yet I couldn't help but hear my mother's voice ring out. Our Lucia just bought a house in the exclusive hillside district. It has a pool, a wine cellar, everything. She always makes us proud. Then, softer but still loud enough. Unlike Carmen, who still lives like a student. A few guests glanced at me awkwardly. I smiled politely, refusing to react. My silence seemed to irritate my mother more than any outburst could have. As the evening progressed, the comments sharpened with each glass of wine. My cousin Javier boasted about his new sports car, and when I didn't join in the bragging, Roberto laughed. "Don't worry, Carmen. Maybe one day you'll get a used model." I set my glass down. My hands trembled, but not from anger, from restraint. I could have ended it all right there with one sentence: "This entire hotel is mine." I could have watched their smug faces collapse, their arrogance crumble. But no, not yet. Instead, I slipped away from the terrace and found myself walking through the quieter service corridors of the hotel. Staff passed by, nodding respectfully, but no one said a word. When I reached the manager's office, Miguel was waiting. "You shouldn't let them treat you like this," he said firmly. "You're the owner. They don't deserve your silence." "I know, Miguel," I whispered. "But there's something I need to understand first." He looked at me with concern, but didn't press. He knew me well enough by now to recognize that I wasn't acting out of weakness. This was deliberate. Back in my small room, I sat on the bed listening to the muffled hum of the laundry machines. The air smelled faintly of detergent and bleach. Hardly the environment for a reunion, let alone for the owner of a five-star resort. Yet I stayed, because every insult, every act of favoritism, every casual dismissal was revealing something I had long suspected but never faced directly. My family's cruelty wasn't random. It wasn't careless. It was rooted in something much deeper, an old wound I hadn't yet uncovered. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of my grandfather. He was sitting on the veranda of his old house, the sea behind him, smiling that knowing smile he always wore when he believed I was on the verge of a discovery. And when I woke, I felt it in my bones. This trip was leading me to answers I had been searching for my entire life. The following day was dedicated to a family outing arranged by my parents. A private catamaran had been booked to sail along the coast, complete with champagne, oysters, and a hired photographer to capture memorable moments. Naturally, the seating was arranged to spotlight Lucia and Roberto. When I stepped aboard, my mother waved vaguely toward the back. "Carmen, why don't you sit near the crew? That way you won't get seasick." It was said with such false concern that a few cousins chuckled. I bit back a reply and quietly settled on the bench near the railing, the salty breeze cooling my face. The hours dragged on with endless conversations about real estate, luxury brands, and vacations abroad. Every word was meant to highlight what I supposedly lacked. I stayed silent, occasionally offering a polite nod. Yet, when the photographer moved around, snapping candid pictures, I noticed something curious. He kept trying to include me in the frames, even when my family ignored me. Our eyes met once, and he gave a subtle nod of respect. That small gesture warmed me more than the sun overhead. When we docked, we returned to the hotel for an afternoon gathering in the gardens. Long tables were set under white canopies, decorated with orchids and silver cutlery. The staff had prepared everything perfectly, as they always did. During lunch, the conversation turned dangerous again. My Aunt Elena asked innocently, "Do you ever wonder why Ernesto treated Carmen differently?" The table fell silent for a moment. My mother's expression hardened. Because he pitied her, that's why. He always wasted too much attention on her silly drawings. Her words hit me like stones, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I glanced toward the staff, who were standing discreetly at the edges. They knew the truth. They knew I wasn't pitied, I was chosen. Roberto leaned in, smirking. Maybe he left you something in his will, Carmen? A sketchbook, perhaps? Lucia laughed delicately, covering her mouth with her hand. My father joined in with a forced chuckle. The cruelty was relentless, but something about Elena's question lingered in my mind. Why had she asked it that way? Almost as if she suspected more. That evening, while the others indulged in cocktails again, I wandered into the hotel library, an elegant lounge filled with leather chairs and rows of books. It had been one of my grandfather's favorite places. As I traced my hand along the shelves, I remembered sitting there as a child, sketching quietly while he read. He had always defended me against my mother's criticisms. One day, Carmen, you'll see. What you think is weakness will become your strength, he once told me. Now, surrounded by the faint smell of polished wood and old paper, I felt those words echoing louder than ever. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, I just need to know why. Why the hostility? Why the resentment that went beyond simple comparisons? My mother's disdain, my father's coldness, Lucia's superiority, it all seemed orchestrated, almost personal. I didn't know it yet, but the answer was closer than I imagined. And when it came, it would change everything I believed about my family. The third morning began with storm clouds gathering over the ocean. The waves crashed harder than usual, and the wind rattled the palm trees outside the lobby. Somehow, it felt fitting. My family's tempers often mirrored the weather. At breakfast, I arrived early and chose a quiet corner. For a few minutes, it was peaceful. I sipped coffee, watched the rain blur the horizon, and let myself breathe. But soon enough, the storm entered in human form, my mother, Lucia, and Roberto, followed by the others. Lucia spotted me immediately. Why are you hiding back here? Come, sit with us. Her tone dripped with sarcasm. Still, I obeyed, sliding into my chair at the far end of the long table. Almost instantly, the conversation returned to the usual theme, achievements and possessions. Javier bragged about his new business venture. Roberto complained about luxury car dealers as though it were a noble struggle. My parents nodded approvingly at every word. When my turn came, my father asked pointedly, "And what about you, Carmen? How is that design thing?" I smiled politely. "It's doing well. We've expanded internationally." He raised an eyebrow. "Internationally? Really?" Lucia laughed, waving her fork. "She probably means she printed a brochure for someone abroad." "Don't exaggerate, Carmen." The table erupted with laughter. I forced a smile, though my chest tightened. And then unexpectedly, my Aunt Elena spoke again. "You know, Ernesto used to say Carmen would surprise us all one day. He said she had something the rest of us lacked." The laughter faltered. My mother shot her a sharp look. My father was sentimental. He didn't always see clearly, but I caught Elena's eyes across the table. There was something in her gaze, hesitation, curiosity, maybe even guilt. Later that day, we gathered in the lounge as the storm forced everyone indoors. Board games, gossip, and endless glasses of wine filled the hours. I sat by the window, sketching absently in a small notebook. Roberto noticed and smirked. "Still drawing? At your age?" Before I could answer, Miguel entered quietly, leaning toward me. "Miss Carmen, may I speak with you for a moment?" Roberto scoffed. "Urgent business with crayons?" I ignored him and followed Miguel to a side office. His expression was serious. "Miss, I overheard something. Your mother asked the staff about the ownership records. She suspects something." My heart pounded. "And what did you tell her?" "Only that such records are confidential. But you need to be careful." I nodded, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. The secret was no longer entirely safe. When I returned to the lounge, Lucia glanced up at me with narrowed eyes. "What was that about?" I smiled faintly. "Just a small hotel matter. Nothing important." She didn't believe me. I could see it in her face. That night, as thunder rolled over the ocean, I lay awake in my noisy little room, staring at the ceiling. The secret I had protected so carefully was trembling at the edge of exposure. And for the first time, I wondered, maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Because if my family wanted to know the truth, I was ready to let them face it. The storm cleared by morning, leaving the hotel washed clean under a sharp blue sky. My family, however, seemed restless, as if the bad weather had soaked into their moods. Breakfast was quieter than usual, but the tension was thicker than the steam rising from the coffee pots. Halfway through the meal, my mother turned to me suddenly. "Carmen, you've been very secretive lately. Always disappearing, always whispering with the staff. What's going on?" I set down my fork calmly. "Nothing important. Just small matters." Lucia leaned in with a sly smile. "Small matters? Funny how the chef bows to you, the manager treats you like a queen, even the cleaning staff greet you as if you were royalty. For someone who's supposedly simple, you seem awfully important here." All eyes shifted to me. I felt the moment teetering, like a glass at the edge of a table. But before I could respond, Miguel entered the dining hall. His face was neutral, but his eyes flicked toward me briefly. "Excuse me," he said to the table. "Miss Carmen, there's a guest waiting to speak with you in the lobby." A collective murmur rose. My father frowned. "A guest? For you?" I stood up smoothly. "Yes." "Excuse me." Behind me, I heard Roberta whisper, "Maybe one of her clients needs a poster designed." The laughter that followed chased me out of the hall, but I ignored it. In the lobby, Miguel led me to a discreet corner. There was no guest, of course. He handed me an envelope. "From the lawyer. Documents you requested, regarding the inheritance." I tucked it into my bag without opening it. "Thank you, Miguel." His voice softened. "They're starting to sense it. You'll need to decide soon whether to keep the silence or to reveal everything." I nodded, though my thoughts spun. Later, during the afternoon by the pool, my family continued their rituals of exclusion. Lounge chairs had been reserved for everyone except me. When I arrived, my mother said with exaggerated sympathy, "Oh, Carmen, it seems they didn't have enough space. Maybe you'd be more comfortable at the cafe terrace?" I smiled. "The cafe terrace is fine." But as I walked away, I caught Elena watching me again, her brow furrowed. Something about her gaze unsettled me. She knew something, maybe more than anyone else. That evening, while the others dressed for another grand dinner, I retreated to the garden. The air was heavy with the scent of jasmine, and the sky glowed pink with sunset. I sat on a bench, finally opening the envelope Miguel had given me. Inside were copies of my grandfather's will. The words I already knew stared back at me. "I leave the Hotel Miramar in its entirety to my granddaughter Carmen." But there was something else. A letter, handwritten, addressed to me. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "Carmen, if you're reading this, it means you've inherited what I built. I know this will bring conflict, because the truth is your parents never wanted you to have it. They always believed the hotel belonged to Lucia. But I saw in you what they refused to see: patience, strength, dignity. You will face their bitterness, but you must remember you were chosen because you value people, not appearances. That is what will keep this place alive." Tears blurred the ink as I read. The pieces began to fall into place. My family's cruelty wasn't just habit, it was resentment. They believed I had stolen something meant for Lucia. Except I hadn't stolen anything. I had simply been trusted with it. And now, the truth was burning inside me, waiting to be set free. The revelation from my grandfather's letter weighed heavily on me all night. I barely slept, tossing in the cramped bed of room 108, listening to the laundry machines rumble through the walls. Every word echoed. They always believed the hotel belonged to Lucia. By morning, I understood. My silence had protected me so far, but the truth was beginning to press against the seams of this reunion. At breakfast, the tension boiled over. My father's voice cut through the clatter of cutlery. "Carmen, enough games. Why does every employee in this place act like you're someone important?" My mother added sharply, "Yes, why don't you tell us the truth for once?" Dozens of eyes were on me, cousins, uncles, aunts, all suddenly curious. Even Lucia looked uneasy, though she tried to mask it with a smirk. I sipped my coffee calmly. "Maybe they just respect me." Roberto laughed. "Respect? Please. Unless you've secretly become a millionaire, I doubt it." The table roared with laughter, but something in my gaze must have unsettled them, because the noise died quickly. I didn't answer further. Not yet. After breakfast, my mother cornered me in the corridor. "Carmen, listen to me. Whatever delusion you're feeding these people, stop it. Don't embarrass yourself, or us. Her eyes burned with something I hadn't seen before, not just disdain but fear. I didn't respond. I simply walked away, clutching my grandfather's letter in my pocket like a shield. The day continued with another set of family activities, this time a wine tasting in the hotel cellar. The room was dim, lined with oak barrels and crystal glasses. The sommelier greeted everyone warmly, but when his eyes landed on me, he gave a subtle bow. Lucia noticed. "Why do they all act like that around you?" She hissed, too low for others to hear. I shrugged. "Maybe you're not as observant as you think." Her face flushed red, though she quickly masked it with a smile as the sommelier poured her glass. The tasting dissolved into drunken laughter. My cousins made toasts, my father boasted of business deals, Roberto bragged about investments. Yet all I could hear were the unspoken words, "They think it should have been Lucia." That evening, I returned once again to the library. The portrait of my grandfather seemed to watch me from a wall, his kind eyes steady. I whispered aloud, "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" I imagined him nodding, telling me to hold firm. But as I turned to leave, I found Elena standing in the doorway. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression softer than usual. Then she said quietly, "I know." My breath caught. "You know what?" Her eyes flicked to the portrait. "About the hotel. About your inheritance. Ernesto told me before he died." I froze. The world seemed to tilt. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He said he trusted you, Carmen. He said the others wouldn't understand, but one day you'd be strong enough to face them." I stared at her, torn between relief and fear. Finally, I asked the question that had haunted me for years. "Why do they hate me so much?" Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because your mother always believed the hotel should have gone to Lucia. And when it didn't, she never forgave you for being chosen instead." Her words cut deeper than any insult my family had ever thrown at me. But they also gave me clarity. For the first time, I understood. Their cruelty wasn't proof of my worthlessness. It was proof of their resentment. And suddenly, I felt stronger than ever. That night, the hotel hosted the Grand Gala Dinner, an annual tradition during the reunion. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers, the tables draped in white linen, waiters moving with trays of champagne. Guests wore their best clothes. Lucia shimmered in gold, Roberto strutted in a tailored suit, my parents looked every bit the patriarch and matriarch they imagined themselves to be. And me? I wore a simple black dress, elegant but understated. I didn't need sequins to draw attention tonight. As the evening unfolded, the speeches began. My father stood, raising his glass. "To family, to unity, and to the pride we feel in our daughter Lucia, who has always made us shine." Applause erupted, and everyone clinked glasses. My name wasn't mentioned. It never was. But then Elena's voice rang out. "And what about Carmen?" The room hushed. My father's jaw tightened. "Carmen has her own path." Lucia laughed softly, filling the silence. "Yes, her path, with sketches, and whatever it is she does." The laughter bubbled again, but weaker this time. Too many had noticed the way staff treated me. Too many had questions. I rose slowly, my glass in hand. "If we're making toasts, then allow me." Dozens of eyes turned toward me. My heart thudded, but my voice was steady. "I'd like to toast to my grandfather Ernesto, the only person who ever believed in me, even when others didn't." The room shifted uncomfortably. My mother's eyes narrowed into daggers. "I'd also like to toast to truth," I continued, "because sometimes truth hides in plain sight. For example, the truth that this very hotel, the one hosting this reunion, belongs to me." The silence was absolute. Forks clattered onto plates. Someone gasped. My father's face went pale, then flushed crimson. "Don't be ridiculous, Carmen." But Miguel, who had been standing discreetly at the edge of the room, stepped forward. "She speaks the truth. Miss Carmen is the rightful owner of Hotel Miramar, as stated in Don Ernesto's will." Chaos erupted. My cousins whispered furiously, Roberto nearly choked on his wine, and Lucia shot to her feet, her voice trembling with rage. "No, that's impossible. Grandfather would never choose you over me." I met her eyes calmly. "But he did." My mother slammed her hand on the table. "This is absurd. You're lying." I pulled the folded letter from my pocket and placed it on the table. "Here." His words. In his own handwriting, Read them. Hands shook as the letter was passed around. Murmurs filled the air. Some faces showed disbelief, others envy, a few even respect. When the paper reached my parents, my mother refused to look at it. My father's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. Lucia's voice cracked shrill. You don't deserve this. You never did. You've always been the weak one, the failure, the embarrassment. I inhaled slowly, letting her words roll over me without piercing. For the first time, they didn't hurt. They only confirmed what I already knew. Her cruelty came from envy, not truth. I don't need your approval, I said quietly. I only needed to finally understand. And now I do. The room had fallen silent again. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Everyone waited for what would come next. And in that silence I realized I had already won. The ballroom was frozen in shock, like a painting suspended in time. Dozens of faces stared at me, some curious, some hostile, a few even admiring. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible one. I was the center, the truth they couldn't escape. My father's voice finally broke the silence, low but trembling. This changes nothing. We're still your family, and you will treat us with respect. Respect. The word tasted bitter. Respect is earned, not demanded, I replied softly. Did you ever respect me? Did you ever believe in me? He didn't answer. His eyes dropped to the floor. My mother's fury filled the silence instead. You're ungrateful. Everything you are, you owe to us. If we hadn't tolerated your nonsense all these years, you'd have nothing. I looked around the room. The staff who had always treated me with dignity, the walls my grandfather had built, the legacy that now lived through me. No, Mother. Everything I am, I owe to myself and to him. I pointed to the portrait of my grandfather hanging at the far end of the ballroom. His steady gaze seemed to look down on all of us. Lucia shook her head violently, her golden dress shimmering under the chandeliers. This isn't fair. It should have been mine. I was the one who deserved it. Her voice cracked on the last word. And in that crack, I heard the truth. Fear. Fear that without favoritism, she was nothing. Grandfather saw us both clearly, I said. And he chose me. Not because I was better, but because I understood what matters. I turned toward the staff, lined along the walls. This hotel is not just marble and chandeliers. It's people. It's respect. It's kindness. That's the legacy he wanted preserved. A ripple of applause began, not from my family, but from the staff. Waiters, housekeepers, even the chef. Their clapping grew, echoing off the high ceilings. For once, the sound didn't drown me. It lifted me. My mother hissed, grabbing my father's arm. We're leaving. One by one, the rest of my family followed, their pride, too, wounded to stay. Lucia was the last to go. She glared at me, her eyes burning with hatred. You'll regret this. No, I whispered. I'll finally live free. When the ballroom doors closed behind them, silence returned, but was different now. Peaceful, not oppressive. Miguel approached me slowly, his eyes shining. It's done. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. Yes, it's done. Later that night, I returned to my tiny room next to laundry, the place they had thought was fitting for me. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed and smiled. The walls hummed with the rhythm of machines, but instead of feeling trapped, I felt liberated, because it no longer mattered where I slept. The truth was out. The weight of years of humiliation had lifted. And as I lay back, I finally understood my grandfather's last gift, not the hotel itself, but the chance to reclaim my own worth. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the family's leftover. I felt like the owner of my story, and no one could ever take that away.